Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest new album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I think you guys will enjoy if you have similar tastes as me. And today I have a really good one for you guys today. It's actually an album that's coming out this upcoming Friday, but I wanted to get a jump on my thoughts about it and get you guys excited for the release. This is the Tangent's new album, To Follow Polaris. This is a band that was formed in 2002. Their first album was The Music That Died Alone in 2003. And I heard that album upon its release. That was right when I was first getting into modern progressive rock. I had already gotten into progressive rock through my dad and the old classics, Yes, Genesis, Gentle Giant. Those are his favorite bands. But I was hungry for more, hungry for newer bands doing the same style of music. And when I heard about this album and that it involved several members from the Flower Kings that I was already getting into, this was an album I had to get my hands on and immediately fell in love with. And have followed them through their storied career all the way up through now. And this is their 13th studio album, and a little bit different than their previous releases because this album is all done by Andy Tillison. He's the main man, the one who's come up with all the music for these albums, as the main writer, and he's been the main singer throughout most of their career. And so he decided he wanted to make an album all on his own. And that's what this album is. It's basically a Andy Tillison solo album, but over the course of him coming up with this music and recording it and all of that, he decided that this music fit as Tangent music and that it should be released as a Tangent record. And a lot of the reason why this was released this way was because the group itself was busy doing other things, and so it was going to be a while before they could come together again and record a new album. And Andy Tillison didn't want to just sit on his hands and wait for all of his fellow bandmates to become available, so he decided to work on an album all on his own, and that's what we get here, subtitled Tangent for One, I suppose. And it's really exciting that he's able to do all of the stuff here. Andy says, I've always wanted to do this, use what I have learned from Luke, Jonas, Steve, Theo, and many other alumni and take it to final production, and now is the time. So that was the conceit of this record, was Andy Tillison wanted to do everything himself, all the instruments, all the production, the mixing, the artwork, a full project that he just could call his own, that he put all of his heart, blood, sweat, and tears into. And I think the result is a fantastic one. This is actually one of my favorite Tangent releases. As the more I listen to it, I think it's up there in the heights of some of the best stuff that they've come up with as a group. And his playing is really incredible. You don't really miss the other musicians all that much. It just sounds like a full album with all of the elements that you'd expect from a Tangent album. There's those jazzier vibes in a lot of the record. There's the proggier stuff that harkens back to the classic era. There's Andy Tillison's acerbic lyrics and his style of really delving into political themes and things that he's upset about the world that we live in. And it just feels like a classic Tangent record. And I think it's a real big success for Andy Tillison and for the Tangent at large. The album starts with The North Sky, which is an 11-minute track, kind of falls into the mold of a lot of their opening tracks that's full of like this high energy prog that comes out of the gate with this really cool synth line and just gets you worked up and excited to hear what's coming ahead. There's a bit of a more laid back, jazzy, psychedelic, kind of dreamy side in the middle of this that is really interesting. You almost get some kind of Gentle Giant-y kind of fugue-like moments with bass and keyboard interplay, but then it returns to that really high-octane, exciting, proggy bit that you got in the opener. It's a thrilling conclusion to a great opening track, somewhat about finding like a guiding light to keep you grounded as the world just increasingly gets worse around us. I think Andy Tillison came to this track as like, he's so bothered and disillusioned by all of the terrible things going on in the world around him that he needs something to give him hope, to keep him moving forward. And that's what The North Sky is. It's a beacon. It's an anchor in this difficult world to kind of look up and have some sort of hope in some kind of direction in a directionless world. So I think that's something that we can all relate to and is a really great opening track. Then we get A Like in the Darkness, which has a little bit of a darker, more sinister vibe. Feels like you're almost in like an old sleazy jazz club. There's some avant-garde kind of jazzy moments, focus solely on sax and some sparse piano before we get some acoustic guitar entering. But I like this kind of smoky, jazzy flavor before the track gets a lot heavier, led by a keyboard wall of sound and some increasingly jazzier drumming stylings. Really cool. This one is about Andy's plight as an obscure musical artist in a world where you judge success by people's social media clout and by the amount of likes that they have on their posts. And I think Andy Tillotson scoffs at this, that back in the day, talent mattered. You'd get acclaim because you were a good musician and you made quality music. But now it's more about the amount of likes you can get. And if people give you that thumbs up on your post, and it's kind of sad that we've devolved into that instead of what it used to be. And I think that's what Andy Tillotson is really remarking on in this track in his very dark, acerbic kind of way. Then we get into The Fine Line, which brings us out of the darkness into this really light 70s jazz rock kind of aesthetic, very much in the vein of Steely Dan. Very pleasant and smooth as it rolls along, has some funky bits to it. I just really love this track. I think it's a nice breakup in some of these darker tracks that surround it, and showcases Andy's love of like funk and jazz and pop music as well amongst this proggy fray of other things that are surrounding it. And then we get into The Anachronism, which is the big epic of the album. You can't really have a Tangent album without some kind of big prog epic, and that's what we get here. You get a little bit of some atmospherics and some spoken word, kind of news segmenty kind of speak, before we get some really heavy off-kilter dark prog coming in with a big prog outburst before we settle into a groove that lulls you into a little bit of a false sense of security before it gets all intense and over the top all over again. This is another darker track, and Andy's spitting out these lyrics that are very dark and angry, and you can tell that he's mad about the world and about how things are going, about the state of things and the state of governments and how nothing can get solved and things just continue to get worse, and there's just so much war and poverty and racism and all these terrible things that are taking place in the world. And there's just nothing that the government can do to solve these things. And it's just a dark, terrible time to be alive. And you get a lot of great, heavy, intense, jazzy music around all of these political themed lyrics. And that's the hallmark of the Tangent, and what they're able to do expertly is weaving through these different musical movements, focusing on some of these darker, more ominous vibes, a lot of different musical highlights, a lot of great keyboard playing. Andy Tillotson is just outdoing himself with some of these really great keyboard solos and jazzier moments and all of this stuff. And it all culminates in this big epic ending that recalls back to the North Sky, gives you a little bit of a grounding of hope amongst all of this chaos and darkness and ominous feeling. And I really like that kind of epic, uplifting ending that a lot of prog epics have, that Andy Tillotson is really tapping into, like your Supper's Ready and your Close to the Edge and all these grand, magnificent epics that bring things back into the light and give you hope and a majestic feeling to end the track with. And I think it's fantastically done. And then we close off with The Single, which is the shortest track on the album. And apparently this was a track that Andy wrote more than 25 years ago with his band Parallel or 90 Degrees. Never really reached many ears, so he thought he'd bring it back into the Tangent. And it's a catchy, upbeat tune with some really great vocal hooks and powerful harmonies. But just as soon as you think it's just kind of a light pop song, there's still cool proggy moments with chugging keyboards and an off-kilter feel and a little bit of an ELP sort of influence in the keyboard playing. Really fun ending to this album that I thought was enjoyable, and once again was a great break in this kind of darker stuff that you get through the Anachronism. You get a little bit of a light reprieve to end the album with. And then it comes with a couple bonus tracks. You get the radio edit of The North Sky, which is just a shorter, more punchier version of the opening track. And then we get a really interesting track called Tea at Betty's, which is 17 and a half minutes long, which is funny because it's this it's like you're in a jazz club and you're hearing this jazz band play this pretty, typical jazz music. And then all of a sudden it gets more heavy and intense and gets into this like Zappa-esque kind of weird odd sections with time signature changes and different weird instrumental freakouts and things. And then it kind of goes back into that like cool, just laid back jazzy groove. And I think the point of this track, from what I've read in the background of it, is it's kind of imagining this band in a typical jazz club just this cafe or whatever where people are just sitting casually having their meals or their tea or their coffee or whatever, and aren't really paying much attention to the jazz band that's playing in the background. And so the band kind of like ramps up and tries to bring some interest and, bring something out of people, but they're just content to just stay in their little bubbles and just have their tea and have their little cakes or whatever, and give a small smattering of applause at the end without any real passion or excitement for what the band brought to the table in those more high-octane, proggier, energetic moments. So I think it's a fun bonus track. I kind of am glad that it is more of a bonus track and not part of the main album because it's so separate from all the rest of the stuff that you hear. But I think it's a clever idea and a cool little extra thing to have on the plate here. And I just really enjoyed it and enjoyed the idea behind it as well. So really, all in all, it's just a fantastic record. I'm impressed by it. I was a little hesitant when I first heard that it was Andy Tillison solo. I was worried it wouldn't feel as organic and as much of this kind of collaborative nature. I was worried the drums would sound too programmed and not as lively. But Andy Tillison has outdone himself. It just all sounds fantastic. He really went to work on this record and really has played a lot of real drums here, has played some bass, some guitar, some keyboards as he's known for, did all the vocals, and it's just impressive that he can do this all on his own and create such a fantastic album, which I think could rank in the top 5 or so of great Tangent albums. So really fantastic, and I've just been loving it more and more the more I listen to it, and it's one of my favorite releases of the year, so I highly recommend it, and hopefully you guys will go check it out this Friday. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciate this review, and I'll catch you guys in a future episode. Bye everybody. Enjoy the music.